Homer. Kevin Loring Henchquest. I'm the Artistic Director of Indigenous Theatre here at the NAC, and I am honored to welcome Rosanna Deerchild, a talented broadcaster, writer, and now playwright. Rosanna has long been a voice of Indigenous stories, both in media and now on stage. Today, we'll dive into her creative journey, the intersection of personal history and storytelling, and her impact in the world of arts and media. Rosanna, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin.
It's my honor. I absolutely love this play. I saw it in Winnipeg at the Manitoba Theatre Centre there, the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, and it just blew me away. It's such a powerful, warm, funny, and deeply impactful and meaningful show. And so I'm really honored to be able to present it here at the NAC.
Well, thank you very much for bringing it and for bringing me out and for having this conversation. I very much appreciate it.
And this is your first play.
Correct.
That is remarkable.
Thank you.
Because it's so well written. The writing is beautiful. The journey is just absolutely wonderful. You know, a road trip, always good. But it really is a story of reconciliation within a family.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us how you came to that story.
Well, this is a story that's lived in my family for many years. My mother, Edna, is a residential school survivor and thriver. She went to 2 residential schools, one at the age of 5 before that burned down. And then she went to Guy Hill Residential School in near the Pas, OCN, where she spent much of her childhood. She didn't get to go home very often. Both of her parents had passed, so she was kind of an orphan living in the school, even though her sisters were there. Of course, as many people know, they weren't really allowed to interact. And this is a trauma and a wound that she carried with her for 50 years subsequent to being released from the institution. And it was a story that she never shared with anybody, not with me, not with her other family, not even with other people that went to the residential schools. It manifested in various ways. As we know, many residential school survivors suffer with various addictions. They repeat cycles of violence, of neglect, and those kinds of things manifested in my life as well growing up. My mother drank a lot. She was cold. Of course, she took care of us. You know, I always had my hair braided. All my clothes were clean. She sewed up the holes in my knees, put Band-Aids on. But she didn't hug me. She didn't say, "I love you. You're a smart child. You're a beautiful child." Like those things just weren't part of my experience. And I always wondered, you wonder growing up, what have I done? What did I do wrong? What could I do more of? What could I do better that would make my mom love me? And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I even learned about anything about residential school. Of course, we weren't taught that in schools. No, it was a big secret. It was Canada's ugly secret that they did this to generations, 100 years worth of children. So I didn't know about it, and until I did, there was always a wall between us, between my mother and I, and the rest of her children. So when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started traveling across Canada and gathering these stories, these truths from our survivors and thrivers, it was then that I approached my mom and asked her, "What the heck? What's going on here? What is this about?" And that's when she first started to talk about having gone to these schools, or have been taken by these schools, rather, and slowly sort of sharing that experience. I did invite her ultimately to go to the gathering when it went through Winnipeg. She refused. She said, "No goddamn way am I going to talk about, this, and I have no interest." She's much more colorful language, of course. But eventually I goaded and talked her into going. And when we got there, there's thousands of people from across Turtle Island. So many people, so many Indigenous people. Some people even walked. Could you imagine? Hitchhiked from northern, Canada to come to this gathering to share their truth. But there were so many people there, and so many people wanted to join that circle to share their truth, that there just wasn't room for my mom, unfortunately. or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, because then I took her out for tea and we sat near the river at the Forks in Winnipeg, which is, interestingly, the historical gathering place for Indigenous people and nations for thousands of years. And that's really when it's, the dam broke open, Pandora's box was opened, the faucet was, whatever you want to, however you want to put in there. And she started to share that experience and that pain and those tears, and sometimes laughter about those stories. And so that turned into about 5 or 6 years worth of conversations. And we wrote a book of poetry together. So I would write the poem. She would tell me the stories over and over again, which is, was difficult. But I feel like as intergenerational survivors, the least we can do is hear the stories that our parents carry, or our grandparents, or our aunties, or uncles, or cousins. And that was my responsibility to hear those stories, to write those stories. And then I would read them to her, and she would say, "Oh, that's good, my girl. That's good." And so then that poem would be put aside. Or she'd say, "No, no, no, no. You got this part wrong." And then she'd make me listen to the story again. So then I'd read the poem. And then eventually that poetry book, Calling Down the Sky, was put out in the world. And then Ian Ross came along with his program, Pimatewan. I always want to say a different word, but that's not the word I want to say. And invited me to with a bunch of other playwrights to write a play. I thought we were writing one play, Kevin. It was going to be a group sort of, thing where we'd all come together and write a scene. But no. He expected us all to write our own play. And these conversations sort of just kept playing in my head about, I really wanted to concentrate on my experience, having to hear those, and my experience living with a survivor as an intergenerational survivor. So eventually that play just came out. I guess it just sort of lived in me after all those years of having written the poetry with her and sharing her experience. I wanted to share mine too.
Yeah, well, it's a powerful, beautiful story. And I think that is such a common reality across Indian country, that experience of the parents who don't want to talk about this residential school. I grew up in a community that had a residential school in it, and it was the sort of invisible demon in the corner of everybody's room, that was tearing apart the community. And the first play that I wrote was also about surviving, being a survivor of residential school, and so it is something that runs deep in our communities, and this piece is a really powerful journey towards healing, not just for the characters on stage, but for the audience as well, to go along on that journey with you. So tell me about your relationship with your mother and tea. Is that across a lot of communities, that's also, we actually have a special tea that we had made for this show.
I saw.
Yeah.
I'm excited to try it and take
Yes.
some home to Mom.
That's right. So if you come to the show, you can come and have some tea as well. And so it's a real sort of, it's something that we gather around. Of course, it's a real common thing. I grew up in a household where tea was often served, and conversations would flow, from that.
Yeah. Same, grew up in a community where you'd slap on a big pot of water, throw some tea bags in there, and just leave it on the stove all day. My mother is a big fan of the red rose tea.
Yeah.
And lately, however, she's sort of liking the herbal teas. But yes, so that was often how our conversations would, begin. I'd go over and visit her, and we'd, pour some tea, have some bannock. And, I'd say, "What kind of story would you like to tell me today, Mom, if anything?" And so she would launch into a story, and pretty soon we were either crying, laughing, or raging, or, taking the Prime Minister's name in vain.
Which one? All of them?
All of them, just general.
Yeah.
Fist shaking.
Yeah. As a broadcaster, how have you seen representation of Indigenous stories and languages change since you started working in media?
Oh, well, I've been working in media, I'm a little over 30 years now, I guess. but growing up, there was no Indigenous reporters. There was Jim Compton with his beautiful long braids, who everybody was like, oh my gosh, look at that. Duncan McHugh, of course, Carla Robinson, like all these people who made trail for us, right? But at the same time, while they were making trail for us, it was very rare that you would see Indigenous stories, on the news, unless somebody was drumming, dying. What are the four?
Roadblocking.
Roadblocking. All these things, demonstrating, and being generally angry, or sad, or crying. Right. So, and while of course that's valid, of course we need those stories to educate the public. Very rarely did we see us, celebrating and dancing and laughing and being joyous. And on the other side of that spectrum, of course, our missing and murdered Indigenous women, for example, were never covered. They were just gone. Where we were, who the heck knows? But we were just gone. And so I started to understand that probably when I started in the media, like what's happening? Why aren't these stories? So I made a conscious decision to not work in mainstream media. I made a conscious decision to work in Indigenous media. So I worked at NCIFM, which is an Indigenous radio in Manitoba, or APTN, or I started on the first news team there, what eventually became APTN National News, because we felt we were valid. Like, we are valid, we are feasible, we are people, we are part of this country, and our stories matter. So back then there wasn't a lot, right? So, but now we see a lot more. When I started Unreserved on CBC, there hadn't been a national Indigenous radio program for 30 years since Bernelda Wheeler, hands up for her, and with Native Land Now, and there hadn't been a show since then. People said there's no interest. People don't want to know your stories. You don't have a story that anybody wants to hear. I think since then, the 10 years we've been on, we've proven them absolutely wrong.
Yeah, I remember that era too, when it was only negative stories in the media, and the same thing, like you hardly ever saw Indigenous plays, as well, and it was a long time coming for at least some place like the NAC to have an Indigenous theater department where that's all we do. Yeah,
absolutely, and because again, we don't want to see your stories on a stage, right?
Or once every 10 years, maybe, if you're lucky. And your name is Thompson Highway.
Good luck to you, Thompson. Just saying.
We love Thompson Highway, absolutely. No, it's there has been a shift in that way, and it's been a long time coming. But the audiences come to these shows. These shows are, I think, Indigenous stories. I think are some of the most important stories we can tell. On this land. And so hands up to you. You mentioned Jordan Wheeler's mom. And Jordan is, of course, married to Kim Wheeler. And when I saw this play in Winnipeg, she was doing the talkback, and she said, if there's any doubt who the best friend is, she was pointing at herself. Are there other characters in the show that are also pulled from? I mean, of course, your mom, but so is that the pantheon of the characters in the play? Are they all pulled from those characters in your life?
Well, Nikki's definitely part Kim, my bestie, and some other of my very good friends who've helped me along in realizing this truth that I live. And the truth that my mom lives, and how we're going to coexist in that space, right? The character of Mr. Big Chief is sort of a culmination of many of the bosses that I've had, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, who are sort of looking at these stories as just stories, as sort of exploiting and extracting and throwing it in a 30-minute soundbite. The husband, I've never been married, just saying. And is, just that idea of relationships and how difficult it is to navigate in a relationship when you're holding these sort of, these bitter rocks inside your soul. And of course, the broadcaster is fabulous and beautiful and is based on me. So it's fine.
Yeah. Well, that's accurate. Yeah, I think that is what one of the really beautiful things that this play portrays is that intergenerational effect. The trauma that is passed down, intentionally or not, within families of survivors, and it's a difficult thing to navigate when you don't know the stories, and what's really beautiful about this play is how the stories come about, how they come out, and you go from kind of like a kitchen sink drama in a way into a ceremony, in a really beautiful way. And the stage is transformed in this production in an incredibly beautiful way. I'm really excited for our audiences to see that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about speaking truth as a path to healing in both like the broadcasting world and in your art as a writer, as poetry. I know that for myself that a lot of my impulses when I was first starting out was to try to really, like I said earlier, like point the finger at the invisible demons that were in our room, all the time that nobody was talking about, and exposing those difficult truths, but also exposing the beauty within our people.
Yeah. Yes, also wanted to finger point, but also at the same time, I find that finger pointing is not really effective, right? If you're on a stage and you're pointing at the audience, you did this to me.
Yeah.
This is your fault. This is your mess to clean up. Then people are just not gonna. They're not gonna listen.
They shut down. Yeah.
They shut down and they become defensive. They just they put up their own walls. So the purpose of a storyteller is to bring those walls down and to bring everybody into the circle and to have a conversation. Maybe some laughter, maybe some tears. Like we do on the stage when they build that teepee. That was all Renai Morrisseau, by the way. Shout out Renai.
Yeah, Renai.
She's the director and she's a wonderful human being. That was her vision to build that teepee as a ceremony, which has never been done on a stage before, and to bring the audience in, make it feel intimate, make them feel welcome, because many non-Indigenous people still don't know about residential school, incredibly. But I feel like they want to know. It's been my experience as a broadcaster on CBC, as a poet out in the world, and now as a playwright, that people want to learn and unlearn about these things. And so less finger pointing and more, let's just get in the circle and talk about this.
Yeah. And I think this play does that in a really beautiful way. The humor helps, right? Like, of course, and it's a thing that people forget about as Indigenous folk is we're funny.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to forget, right? Like, almost every conversation I have with a non-Indigenous reporter or broadcaster or person really are just like, oh, I'm so surprised that it was funny.
Yeah.
I belly laughed out loud and it was wonderful. And so it's like, yes, you get more than two people. Heck, even if I'm in a room by myself, I'm like, damn, I'm funny. That was hilarious.
Well, you can always tell when the natives are in the house, right? When your show is on, and because they laugh at all the jokes that they're supposed to laugh at, right? And even the ones they're not supposed to laugh at.
It's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's part of that is how we survived.
Yes.
Being able to make fun of everyone.
Yeah.
And everything.
We have to be able to do that, right, as Indigenous people, because if we could cry for generations.
Yeah. We
could cry and rage for generations. But as Indigenous nations, we know that balance is important. We always have to seek that balance. And so for every tear, you have to have some laughter to balance it out. For every piece of darkness, you have to have some light.
Yes.
And that's important.
I totally agree. From my perspective, working here at the NAC and looking at work from across the country, Winnipeg is actually a real priority for me. And so I was really excited to see some really wonderful plays coming out of Winnipeg, including this one. It's the largest urban Indigenous population in the country, and there isn't a resident Indigenous theater company there yet. And it's something that I've been, really hoping and praying for comes down the pipe at some point. Tell me a little bit about like Winnipeg and that scene there and the vibe there, that brings out such amazing Indigenous writers and artists.
Well, I think many in the art scene, I shouldn't probably speak for them, but for me, I love hate Winnipeg. There's that song by the Weaker Thans. I hate Winnipeg. So much as I'm going to write a song about all the things I love about it. I think that Winnipeg is the heart of Turtle Island. I've often said that it's the heart of Turtle Island. It's the place of so many creative, artists, musicians, dancers, painters, revolutionaries. That's an art form. If you're Indigenous, you have to be an activist or an artivist in some way. And I believe so much of that has come out of Winnipeg. I don't know if that's the confluence of the Assiniboine and red, or if it's the fact that it's heart-shaped, or if it's all the bridges that stitch the North and South together and force that relationship to happen, whether it's hard or easy. But Winnipeg, I moved there to go to school, and with the intention of then traveling the world. And then I just never left, so because I get to do all my worldly work in Winnipeg.
Yeah. Well, it is. I remember somebody saying to me that nobody was ever supposed to live here.
Right.
You're just supposed to come and visit, and then like when it's nice, right after it's flooded and the mosquitoes have left a little bit, you gather there and you
with
share
the week
stories.
left that you have.
Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. So now that your play has had this will be its third run.
It is. Wow. Hey, that's
Wow.
wild.
And hopefully many more to come.
Hopefully.
Do you have another play locked and loaded and ready to go
People
after?
keep asking me this question, and I keep saying, I'm sure there's one in there somewhere.
Yeah.
There are some things that I want to explore. Recently, I found my grandfather's grave. He fought in World War I, and I didn't know, I wasn't really attached to that side of the family, my father's side, because he was a bit of a W word, let's just say, and got around, let's just say. And I didn't have a relationship with him until he was, passing away. So I didn't get to know a lot of that history. But recently I found his grave in the Field of Honor in Winnipeg, not far from where I live. So I would like to explore that. Like, what? You went to war? That's, he was very young when he went to war. Both he and his brother went to war. They had a trapper family, and they traded with the Hudson's Bay Company, which is now going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Oh, boohoo. So I'd like to explore that at some point.
Yeah, wonderful. I wonder, is your if I may ask, is your mother still with us?
Yeah, she lives with me and bosses me around all the time, and
Like a good mother?
just gonna sigh heavily there. You take that as you will.
So what was it like sharing your mother's story with audiences?
Oh gosh. It was, let's see, how was it sharing my mother's? It was difficult. I mean, it was difficult, but at the same time, I recognize that it needs to be done. As I said earlier, as intergenerational survivors, our only responsibility is to carry these stories gently into the world, and to ensure that people don't think that they are made up and cannot deny it. Speaking to you deniers, F you. And that it never happens again. That's the most important thing. I don't want my kids, and your kids and my neighbors' kids ever having to go through something like that.
Yeah.
So if we keep these stories in the public no, then the public will say no to those kinds of stories happening again.
And how did she saw the show in Winnipeg?
Oh, yes. She's a superstar. She was right in there, right? Like, that's me. Those are my stories. That's my story. They're like, I'm in there too, Mom. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. So I think it's pretty clear, but I wonder what you hope that audiences take away from seeing the Sukutikuti.
I hope they take away hope, that that families can heal from this, that communities can heal from this, that our nation can heal from this, because This isn't just my story or Indigenous people's stories or survivor stories. This is Canada's story. And as dark and horrible and evil as it was, we can embark on a journey together to heal from that. And all we have to do is listen to the truth, learn it, unlearn it, and bring each other into the circle and heal from it.
Beautiful. Cook, stay up. Thank you so much, Rosanna.
Hagasani.
Well, thanks, everyone, for watching. Be sure to check out more conversations like this on NAC's YouTube channel. Cooksham, Oma.